2 weeks ago, I brought you a video on players to stash for 2027 if you're executing the one-year punt or you are simply in a dynasty rebuild. Last week, I brought you the players you need to be buying if you are going all out in contention for the 2026 season. And this week, we are finding that balancing act. We are walking the middle ground and finding a flexible path to points while also maintaining some future value. So if you are stuck in the middle with a 105, 106, 107 pick from last year and you're unsure which direction to go, I suggest buying these players because they will help you contend, but they will also not level your roster into complete veteran category and put you in a tough position to execute a retool. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Dynasty Price Check. We are going to do a massive roster review giveaway at 2,000 subscribers, which we are just about to hit. Thank you guys so much for the continued support, and make sure you stick around as the last player I highlight on this list is probably my favorite buy of the entire group. Diving right in, the first player we're going to talk about today is Wan'Dale Robinson. I teased him in last week's video, but quite frankly, I am all in on Wan'Dale Robinson this year for the Tennessee Titans, and I'll tell you why. Because when he was slated to be the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee, I wasn't a fan. Now that they added Carnell Tate in the draft, and this man is going to be able to comfortably sit in the slot, gets to reunite with his former head coach, Brian Daboll, who has found great usage for him and upside in the past, and gets to be that safety blanket for Cam Ward to help him move the chains to continue to push forward and ascend in his NFL career. I believe the market has not fully priced in this new volume profile for Wan'Dale Robinson. He's currently sitting at wide receiver 42 on community rankings, which I find to be way too low for a guy that is coming off a 92 catch season with over 1,000 yards and had 140 targets. Now, if you're win now, he could be a great wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 flex play for you. And if you are somewhere in the middle, like I mentioned in the intro to the video, he's a guy that, because he just recently got extended and is still quite young here, is a guy that could definitely be an upside flex play or wide receiver 2 for the long haul over the next several years as you complete your retool or start to lean more into contending in 2027. Where Wan'Dale is going to thrive is that PPR floor. A guy that, sure, isn't going to give you a 27-point week, but could very comfortably sit between 12 to 14 points per game, with Cam Ward taking that step forward and being the guy that, God forbid anything happened to Carnell Tate, could see insane volume usage down the stretch. Another underrated element to Wan'Dale Robinson's game that I think needs to be highlighted here is, although I alluded to him as a slot player that will help move the chains, his role has evolved a lot over the last few seasons, and that's not the only thing in his wheelhouse. In fact, beyond just the short yardage plays last year, Wan'Dale Robinson earned 22 targets that were beyond 20 yards, meaning this guy can actually offer you some big play upside as well. And if Cam Ward and that deep ball are to really take off this year, I wouldn't rule out a deep touchdown from Wan'Dale Robinson or 2 this season that could pose for some serious blow-up games. So let's talk some trade ideas on how to acquire him. The first trade here is a simple one. Wan'Dale Robinson for a 27 second and 2 fourth-round picks. Now, of course, you're hoping that 27 second ends up in the back half of that 27 class, assuming you are buying him to at least attempt contending this year like we had spoken about. But again, I think this is fair value, and quite frankly, those fourth-round picks mean very little to me. If you have to add them as a sweetener to get the deal done, I have no issue with it. The next trade we're going to talk about is a guy that I'm a lot lower on than the general consensus, and that's Kyle Monangai. At 24 years old in a split backfield for the Chicago Bears, this man is going to be a really good real-life NFL player and probably help move the chains and punch in touchdowns for that high-powered Chicago offense. But in fantasy football, where we rely a lot on either PPR volume for a running back or getting those high-value quality touches, I do think DeAndre Swift is just too much of a vulture or pain in his side to ever be anything beyond a flex play or running back 3 while still on his rookie deal. If DeAndre Swift does not come back next year, and you in the comments are going to say, well, yeah, DeAndre Swift's in the last year of his deal. We have not ruled out an extension, number 1, and number 2. the Bears will just go find another player that fits that role, and this will always have competition. And as I alluded to his age, at 24, he was a late prospect, meaning if this man is going to try to come out and be a workhorse back in the NFL someday, you're probably seeing that happen beyond age 26 when his rookie deal is over, and that's past the point where your dynasty value can really peak and allow Kyle Monangai to ever be in the conversation of a 5th, 4th, or even 3rd round dynasty startup pick like we've seen out of some other running backs like James Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, Breece Hall, etc. Now, the final trade we're going to talk about here is a guy that you guys already know I throw strays at every single video, and that's Ricky Pearsall. It's not that I actually don't think Ricky Pearsall could potentially give the Niners some value this year. I just don't see a path to a serious dynasty value increase. Again, when we talk about the age of very late prospect, he's going to be 26 years old before the NFL season kicks off. He's had so many injury struggles. They just added another wide receiver in the draft at the 33rd overall pick. I just think it's going to be tough for Ricky Pearsall to ever enter a conversation where he's above an 8th or 7th round startup pick. And quite frankly, when we talk about wide receivers in dynasty and trying to find value, I'd rather take shots on guys that have more upside to either increase a ton or have a lower floor for just points on a weekly basis. When we talk about guys that I love out there from last week's video, like the Mike Evans of the world on his own team, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, these are guys that are just going to be very much safer comparatively to Ricky Pearsall, who still carries a ton of risk. And Wan'Dale Robinson is that guy for me, a solid PPR floor, while Ricky Pearsall has struggled to stay on the field. The next guy we're going to talk about is none other than Jared Goff, who I believe to be one of the most grossly undervalued players in all of Dynasty. He sits at quarterback 21, yet he has given you 4 top 10 finishes in a row. And if you guys remember from my video a few weeks ago when I unpacked an ungodly amount of data about the strength of schedule in the correlation to fantasy football production, you would see that Jared Goff is going to benefit a lot this year since the Detroit Lions have the #1 easiest strength of schedule. And do I even need to list the weapons he's got at his disposal? Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Isaac Tesla, the list goes on and on. This man is about to come out in a Dan Campbell offense that does not take their foot off the gas. We've watched them run up 50 points on their opponents several times before, coming off a disappointing year last year where they missed the playoffs, and he is going to deliver in what I expect to be another top 10 finish. And the other thing about Jared Goff that I don't think people realize is they treat him like he's an old head out there. They treat him like this man is on the edge of retirement. He is 31 years old, guys. He's only a year and a half older than Joe Burrow, who goes in the 1st or 2nd round of your dynasty startups. Yet I picked up Jared Goff in the 7th round of a startup the other day that was a super flex league. So if you are going to look and buy a guy like Dak Prescott and think he's my ticket to a top 10 finish, why not just go a little cheaper and buy Jared Goff, who is going to give you the same amount of upside, but is a fraction of the cost? And so as I approach this offseason, not only am I doing a ton of tear down trades to Jared Goff from some of my other potentially considered premium quarterbacks and getting a massive haul coming back to me on the other side, but I'm also exploring the opportunity to buy Jared Goff outright for picks because I think his value will hold very well going into next season. So let's talk some trade ideas. The first trade here is not all 3 quarterbacks for one. This was just a blanket good way to show you guys I'd be fine pivoting from any of the players you see on the right side here, CJ Stroud, Tyler Shook, Malik Willis, into Jared Goff. Now, I think you can probably go CJ Stroud to Jared Goff 1 for 1, or maybe even include like CJ Stroud in a 3rd and get Jared Goff in a 2nd. Something very small like that, a tiny sweetener. Same thing with Tyler Shook. They go in damn near the exact same range. So you could probably do a 1 for 1 swap there. And if I'm anywhere near contending, I'm doing that. I know a lot of people are not going to like this because Shook did show some rushing upside last year and it's attached to a nice Kellen Moore offense. They added Jordan Tyson to this backfield or to this wide receiver room this year and added Travis Etienne or Etienne, whatever we're going to call him these days, to the backfield this year. But all that being considered, I think we forget how fickle these NFL franchises can be about the quarterback position. You can be the sweetheart one year and out on the street the next year. And Tyler Shook does not have the draft capital, does not have the contract insulation to be a long mainstay on your dynasty roster. Now, if this season goes well, that could be a conversation we open up to. But if we're talking about avoiding risk and starting to construct a roster I feel confident about for the next several seasons to contend, I think it's worth taking Jared Goff over Shook, because when we look at it, guys, I already gave you the stats and you can fact check me. Jared Goff delivers top 10 performances at a perennial rate. Tyler Shook is yet to give you that. So why buy a guy that could potentially give you a top 10 finish when you have a guy that's gonna give you a top 10 finish damn near every year already on the roster? And finally, it's Malik Willis. I'm trying to move Malik Willis in every single league. I've been lucky enough to have him stashed on my bench. I don't think this man is a long-term starter in the league. I think he is this year's Justin Fields with a nice flash of rushing ability on a terrible offense with very minimal weapons in Miami, and is going to be probably not even starting come week 10 of this NFL season. So if I can add something to Malik Willis, whether it be a second-round pick, whether it be a throw-in player like a Trey Harris or potentially even a Rico Dowdle, I'm totally fine doing so to move my way up to a more consistent asset like Jared Goff. The next trade we're going to talk about is alluding to one of those tear-off trades I mentioned. Can I take Joe Burrow and a throw-in player that I just mentioned, like Trey Harris, maybe a young upside player, and get back Jared Goff and Chase Brown, a running back that I expect to be a top 10 finisher this year, that probably won you your league down the stretch last year and is most likely going to get extended by the Bengals this season, spelling another nice little boost in his dynasty value. I think this would go for any of other receivers in this range. If you could do the same thing for getting a Rome Odunze in a second, I would do it. If you could get Zay Flowers in a second, I would also be comfortable doing that. If we could move up into the range of a Carnell Tate or a Jordan Tyson, or even get a Mekhi Lemon in a second-round pick coming back to you, I would be comfortable doing that, as well as the difference between Joe Burrow and Jared Goff, quite frankly, guys, is just not that much. Their age is minimal difference, and their scoring potential, and especially Jared Goff's ability to stay on the field, should give him almost the edge here, yet he's priced 5-6 rounds cheaper in a dynasty startup. The next one we're going to do is simply a picks trade, right? And I guess we have one player in here. I think you do probably have to include a small player, someone in this year's rookie draft for the optics. I picked Deshaun Stribling here, as I think he's kind of that guy that I don't think is going to get any workload really this year. Maybe he has more of a breakout next season. But if we're talking about a complete and utter wild card, the Niners have so many options still. George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. We already talked about Mike Evans and Ricky Pearsall. I think this is a totally fine, including player that might make the argument he's close to second round value, and then throwing a 28 first into the mix. The final piece of this trade that I really wanted to highlight is Jared Goff is the perfect example of a player that you can use the dynasty rental strategy on. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it is buying a player that is going to most likely hold 90% or more of their value going into next offseason. So for example, if you buy Jared Goff today for a 2028 first round pick, and he delivers you a top 10, or even, let's be gracious and say, a top 12 finish in next season, when you go into your 2027 dynasty offseason and you go to other teams in a superflex format that need quarterbacks, I think it's very likely that only 1 year older at 32, Jared Goff is still going to be worth a 28 first round pick, or at the very worst, a 29 first round pick. And at that point, you've actually lost zero value. You've just rented Jared Goff's production while you tried to contend, and now you're getting that value back 1 year later. And if you get a slightly depreciated value on that, so you don't get a Stribling coming back the other direction, that's fine. It's part of how a rental works. Next guy I'm buying everywhere is Michael Pittman, because his wide receiver 49 price tag is absolutely laughable to me. This man has delivered you top 20 wide receiver finishes at a damn near perennial rate. If you go back and look, he has given you 4 top 20 wide receiver finishes in the last 5 seasons. And the only season he failed to do so was when Anthony Richardson was throwing him the ball, and he had a broken back for over 60% of the season. Yet somehow he's almost outside the top 50 wide receivers in Dynasty. He's not even that old. He's only 28 years old. He just got traded to Pittsburgh and extended. And on top of that, this man is going to offer you an incredible amount of PPR upside. A stat that I keep finding myself going back to is that last season, Michael Pittman's average depth of catch was 8.9 yards. However, that was taking into effect the yards after the catch. If you look at the deeper analytics, you'll actually find that his average depth of catch before the yards after the catch was 6.6 yards. Then, if we look at the Pittsburgh quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, last year, his average depth of target was 6.7 yards. I think Michael Pittman and Aaron Rodgers are going to be a match made in heaven in the PPR format. He should offer you a very steady floor while also giving you some red zone upside. While DK Metcalf is used a lot more as that field stretcher, Michael Pittman should be picking up a ton of targets from Aaron Rodgers. And the beautiful thing about buying Michael Pittman is that he's not just a one-year rental. At age 29, with a guy that is not reliant on his blistering pace, he profiles as a guy that can actually age gracefully and still be very productive into his veteran years here. We've seen the likes of Davante Adams, Mike Evans still have very productive seasons even at age 32, 33. Michael Pittman is absolutely a guy that could profile in the same range, yet you were able to buy him so cheap, and he could be a mainstay on your roster for the next 4 to 5 years. Let's talk trade ideas. Starting off easy again with just a pick. A 27-second is probably enough to get you there with the way this class is being inflated. But again, I'm fine throwing a 4th or a tiny sweetener on the end of it if someone's going to be a real stickler. The next trade is one I love making, offering someone either their handcuff or a running back dart throw to an extremely running back needy team, and including a 3rd round pick. This would go for a Tyler Algier, a Jordan Mason perhaps. These are guys that I don't expect to be a massive difference maker on your roster barring some major injuries, while Michael Pittman can be a guy that at only 28 years old could give you a hell of a lot more than just this season and be one of those productive veterans that we see relied on until the 32-33 season. We're watching guys like Mike Evans, Davante Adams get it done until late in their career. Michael Pittman is not reliant on his blistering pace to survive. His playstyle will translate as he becomes a more veteran receiver in the league. And finally, I think taking in a guy like Michael Wilson, who had extreme upside in the back half of last year's fantasy football season, but seems to be playing in a very rough Arizona Cardinals team this year in one of the toughest divisions in football. There's questions, can he repeat that level of production with Marvin Harrison Jr. coming back healthy and Trey McBride obviously in the building, adding Jeremiah Love, who's going to be a clear option in the passing game, as that's a huge part of his skill set and a big reason we all drafted him at the 101 in our rookie drafts this year. And so if you want to move off the risk of a guy that's going into a contract year in Michael Wilson and say, maybe we just saw Michael Wilson's peak dynasty value, add a 27-3rd to his side and go ahead and get Michael Pittman in a 27-2nd coming back. What you're most likely getting is the more consistent scoring asset, and you're getting higher draft capital in next year's class, which at this rate, guys, we all know can be traded for a lot. Those 27 seconds, even next offseason, are going to be worth a ton. The next guy we got to talk about is Jakobi Meyers. I feel like he is the unsung hero in this Jacksonville offense, because after he was traded to Jacksonville, you watched his stats uptick right back to where they were in previous seasons as a solid wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. And at wide receiver 50, $59 price tag, you're also pricing Jakobi Meyers as if he's a one-year rental. Yet at age 29, getting extended and building rapport with Trevor Lawrence in a Liam Cohen offense, this man should absolutely be in the conversation of a top 40 wide receiver asset in Dynasty at the bare minimum. Now, I know we're all excited about Parker Washington out there, and Travis Hunter was a premium draft pick, with Brian Thomas Jr. still waiting after a top 6 season in his rookie year. But Jakobi Meyers is profiling as a chain mover, as a red zone threat, as a guy that has earned the respect and rapport of his quarterback. And quite frankly, he will have a significant target share in this offense. And so if you can buy that volume for very cheap, I think on any contending roster, or even a roster that's somewhere in the middle, it is very worth the price. Let's go over what he costs on the open market. Like I mentioned, Jakobi Meyers is quite cheap. In fact, Chimere DK and a 28th third-round pick might even get you there. Now, that's probably unlikely, knowing that Tennessee did add Carnell Tate and Wan'Dale Robinson, and now this man is pretty deep down the pecking order. But if you look over to his teammate at Tajay Spears, who some people still believe in, although there's Pollard and now Singleton in that backfield, you might be able to package him with a young upside swing like a Chris Brazzell in this year's draft and see if that could get Jakobi Meyers off of a potential rebuilding roster that wants to move these veterans for cheap. But more likely than not, you're probably going to have to give up another player in the same range at a different positional value like running back. And guys like Rico Dowdle and Jakobi Meyers go back to back in Dynasty startups. So I'm okay moving on from a Rico Dowdle, who, although he went crazy during that short stretch in Carolina last year, is already 28 years old. And wide receivers do hold their value a lot better in those veteran years than running backs do, as we've seen in the past. And finally, another one I love is capitalizing on the Bill hype train. I'm seeing it start again this Dynasty offseason. I wasn't a believer last year. I'm not a believer this year. He's an old running back prospect with no draft capital, and Rachaad White has that upside in the passing game. Previous chemistry with Jaden Daniels. The writing is on the wall for the Bill believers to get hurt again. Finally, I hope you stuck around, because my favorite player on this entire list right now is actually Jaylen Warren. And a big reason for that is Kenny Gainwell thrived in the passing game last year. In fact, as you guys know, he was Aaron Rodgers' #1 target last season. Yet all those targets are being vacated. And even with Kenny Gainwell on the team, Jaylen Warren had 40 catches on 42 targets. That's very sure hands and some great PPR upside. And not to say that he wasn't an effective runner either. In fact, he was very productive in the red zone, and at only age 27, profiles to be one of these guys in that sweet range of running backs that, even if Pittsburgh doesn't extend him, could be a solid jump around candidate on running back needy teams and an upside flex player RB2 for seasons to come. Think David Montgomery, who's getting another injection of life at age 29. I absolutely think Jaylen Warren could be that guy. Let's say things don't work out in Seattle for Jadarian Price next season. Could Jaylen Warren be a guy that they look to along with Zach Charbonnet to split the backfield going forward? Same thing could be said about other teams in the league that are looking at running back replacements in the next few seasons. I like Jaylen Warren as a buy and hold candidate. And as I mentioned before, he's so discounted. He's got a ton of upside. So let's go ahead and look at what he costs on the open market, because quite frankly, this is a guy that, although he's dirt cheap, could be giving you an RB15 finish this year. Starting off again with just picks, yeah, a 27 second and 4th should be enough to get you Jaylen Warren, and I'd hope again that this is a late 27 second. If you can get away with doing it for a 28 second, I far prefer that deal, obviously, but I think that's going to be hard sell. Now, the next one I think is a lot more realistic. If you've got someone that needs either wide receiver depth or is looking to get a young upside play on their roster, Jaden Higgins could be the right fit. And although I thought that Jaden Higgins actually looked quite good towards the end of the season last year and in the playoffs, this Texans offense isn't exactly known for their air yards, and I don't think there's going to be a massive piece of the pie for Jaden Higgins to eat. Now, Is Tank Dell going to be even playable this season? That all remains to be seen. But Nico Collins being the alpha there, Dalton Schultz always having a consistent target floor, and a Texans offense that has been so vocal about wanting to run the football and run one of those old school ground and pound offenses, adding David Montgomery. I think Jaden Higgins could have a slight uptick in production, but maybe not the second-year breakout we're all hoping for. And if you need running backs, I think this is a totally fair move to make. The next one, again, is Ricky Pearsall. I'm not going to give you the whole spiel again, but I'm totally happy making this positional swap. And finally, I think that you can capitalize on the Jalen Coker hype. I know he got extended, but this Carolina offense also doesn't offer a ton of passing volume. They want to run the football. Chuba Hubbard is going to be involved. Tedero McMillan is that alpha. They just added Chris Brazzell in the draft this year. I do think it's going to be a crowded room with not a lot of upside with Bryce Young still in the building. Maybe next year's a better year for Jalen Coker, but if you're running back away on a contending roster, I don't want to wait. Let's go ahead and send those offers. Thank you guys so much for coming along on today's video. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button as we are so close to our roster review, the marathon giveaway, almost at 2,000 subscribers. Don't forget to hop on over to dynastypricecheck.com to submit your trades to be reviewed on the next episode of Trade Titans. If you haven't seen this week's episode already, we had Chev from the FF Dynasty and Addy from Two Guys One Pod. Great show, some awesome Dynasty insight in there, so make sure you go show it some love. Like, comment on this video and let me know who are some very undervalued players that you are buying across the Dynasty landscape, whether you're a contender, rebuilder, or a retooler, and I will see you guys in the next one.